I'll call together the August 7th meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council Finance Committee. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to anything that is not on our agenda? Seeing no one, we will go to the first item on our agenda, which is a grant request from Transition House for rehabilitation of 320 South Salina Street. Mr. Rowell?
Good afternoon, Chairman Hart and Finance Committee members. My name is David Rowell. I'm the Housing Project Planner. This is a grant request from the Transition House for rehabilitation of 320 South Salina Street. The project's known as Casa Mariana. The recommendation to Finance Committee is to consider and recommend that City Council allocate $209,750 in Federal Home Investment Partnership Program or home funds for a 4-year grant to Transition House for rehabilitation of its low-income rental housing property located at 320 South Salinas. The City of Santa Barbara receives federal home funds annually that are used to promote affordable housing through activities such as acquisition, rehabilitation, new construction, and tenant-based rental assistance. The City of Santa Barbara released a request for proposals, or an RFP, for $943,000 of home funds in June of 2018. The RFP selection criteria is as follows. Is the applicant a community housing development organization, also known as a CHODO? And I'll talk about that in a minute. What is the developer's expertise with home-funded projects? What is the developer's compliance with home regulations? Is the project in compliance with home funding guidelines? What's the cost and financial feasibility of the project? The timing of the project? Energy and efficiency and conservation considerations? And finally, what's the project's impact on affordable housing? So Casa Mariana and the Transition House were, HUD requires that a minimum of $185,646, or 15% of the total amount of available home funds, must be set aside for use by a community housing development organization, or a CHODO. The Transition House is a qualified CHODO meeting HUD's requirements pertaining to expertise, capacity, and board representation, and they have been certified as a CHODO by the City of Santa Barbara. So the Transition House was selected for a $209,750 rehabilitation project. The funding of this rehabilitation project satisfies an August 2018 deadline for committing home funds to a CHODO and meets the affordable housing priorities outlined in the city's consolidated plan and housing element. So Casa Mariana, the owner, is Transition House. The manager is the Transition House. The property is comprised of 19 units, 18 of which are to low-income, formerly homeless families. The other is the property manager. It's a total of 2 buildings. The funding itself is a grant rather than a loan because the property does not generate the necessary cash flow to repay additional debt. And as a condition of this grant, the affordability covenant will be extended an additional 30 years to require that the property remain affordable to low-income residences until the year 2094. It's a long time. This is a picture of Casa Mariana. You're on the second floor looking down into the courtyard. Part of home funding requires that there's a property inspection every 5 years, and I've personally inspected this property twice. It's very well maintained. Like I said, there's 2 buildings, and it's comprised of 1 studio, 9 one-bedrooms, 8 two-bedrooms, and 1 three-bedroom. So here's the actual project budget. The original building, the bigger building, is going to have a roof replacement. Both buildings will be painted, and what's included in the painting is any kind of gutter repair or extension, any kind of dry rot removal and replacement or staining. There's also going to be some site work to improve the drainage. We're going to grade an area, improve the drainage, and put a small retaining wall in. And then in 9 units, we're going to do some plumbing work in the bathroom, which includes a shower and tub replacement. So that's the $209,750 grant budget. Here's another picture at Casa Mariana. An interesting piece of information about the tenants is there's approximately 62 tenants, and more than half are under the age of 18. So you have a real nice family mix in there. They have a really nice play area on the side of the building, but it's, once again, really well maintained, and the people are really happy there. So in staff's determination and recommending this grant, Casa Mariana, since its acquisition in 1997, has been a very successful project and is in full compliance with the city's affordable housing program. We do an annual certification, and like I mentioned, we do a home inspection. Transition House, as I mentioned before, is a qualified CHOTO and meets HUD's 15% home fund set aside and usage requirement. Rehabilitation of Casa Mariana will extend its useful life. And finally, like I mentioned before, a condition of the grant is to extend the affordability covenant another 30 years. So this concludes my short presentation on this grant request. I'm going to leave the recommendation on the screen, and if you have any questions, we have Kathleen Bowski in the audience, Executive Director from the Transition House. So we're open to any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Ralph, for the good presentation. Are there any questions for staff? Or Ms. Bowski? Ms. Bowski, would you like to say anything in particular, or we can ask you questions if you'd prefer?
Members of the Finance Committee, thank you for hearing our request today and taking the time to hear more about our project. It has helped hundreds of families. Oh my God. Okay, can you hear me now? That sounds better. So thank you for hearing our request today and learning more about our Casa Mariana project. It is a affordable housing complex with supportive services attached for homeless families with children who come to the facility via our homeless shelter. And when people move into Casa Mariana, there's an expectation, if they're able, that they will work with case management to continue to improve their situation and one day return to market rate housing. And for many of them, that is not only a possibility, but a reality. Perhaps the most attractive piece, I think, for the city's consideration of this proposal is gaining the additional years on the affordability covenant. For $200,000, that's not a whole lot of money when you think about it to keep affordable housing in our community. The city has invested in this project since its purchase. With CDBG funding in the past, we've done partial rehabilitation of the project. This grant would allow us to continue with that. You may have noticed on a prior slide we're asking for money for, I believe it's 9 bathrooms to have work done. We've had other bathrooms done 2 years ago when we received CDBG funding. So thank you again for your consideration, and if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Thank you for your excellent work. We're really proud to be a partner with Transition House. Any questions? Councilmember Dominguez?
Yes, I have a question, but first, again, to echo Mr. Hart, thank you very much for the work you do personally at Transition House and for the work Transition House does. It's a gem in the world of nonprofits in Santa Barbara, which is already saying a lot.
Thank you.
So thank you for that history. Regarding this house, you mentioned the supportive services. Would you mind taking a second and explaining maybe more specifically one of the social services that you're particularly proud of, or maybe mentioning one of the successes just to add a little more color? I mean, the numbers are great, but just to take a minute and shine some light on.
Certainly. So our case management involves focusing on financial stability for the household. And so we do a lot of financial literacy training through case management, and there is a case manager that is dedicated to the families at that facility, and we have an employment specialist that helps them with work. And of course, a lot of the families in Santa Barbara that become homeless are already working. They're just not making enough money to afford housing, or they might have had a one-time situational event occur in their life, like a medical event that kept them from working for several weeks, and they didn't have the savings that enabled them to keep paying rent. So we're working on budgeting, saving money. Those are requirements of participation in our shelter program. And then once they get in housing, improving their situation. And many of them, you know, they're happy with the opportunity that they had to go through the program. So they're motivated to complete their goals and then be able to move out into market rate rent rental units. We have had a family from that complex move to another area, and they had saved enough money during their time at Transition House to purchase a house, and that was in Palmdale, California. They were able to transfer. They worked at Macy's here in town and were able to transfer to a Macy's located there. This was several years ago, and have a very stable future for their family.
Great. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Any other questions for Ms. Paskey or for staff? Okay. Thank you very much for that information.
Thank you.
Is there a motion? I'll move. Motion to approve the staff recommendation. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed and abstained? None. So the matter carries unanimously, and that is the last item on our agenda. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.